no political party is speaking up in the interests of that distinct British people. So Zia Yusuf came out and did a video on Reform UK's accounts announcing the new Britannia Card. And it's patriotic because he called it Britannia, by the way, and using old footage of London before the mass migration of the Second World War, Tony Blair's premiership, and the Boris wave demographically and culturally scarred this country and economically impoverished it. And he announced that the new Britannia Card under a reform government would be essentially a visa that you could pay a one-off large fee, I think it was like £250,000, as a wealthy foreigner, come over, live here, and not have to pay tax. And it is designed to attract the world's so-called best and brightest. And the problem that you have is that this is just the wing of neoliberalism that will actually achieve economic growth rather than egalitarian redistribution. It's still acting on a purely materialistic political axis. And it can't define who the party is supposed to be representing, because it is treating everyone from everywhere as a Brit in waiting, and Britain itself as an entity is not the home of a distinct people who practice a distinct culture, whose activities register as a distinct economy, because the economy originally came from the oikos, the home, and the nomos, which governed it, were the rules which governed homes and households, which were, again, the basis of tribes and then city-states. The economy is not, the culture is not, the nation is not, and the party is not bound up in people. Instead, it just thinks of Britain as a shopping mall, a retail park, an economic zone, a way station for the moneyed international class. And this is just the inverse of the demented redistributive mindset of the likes of Gus O'Donnell, quoted in David Goodhart's The Road to Somewhere, who told him at a dinner in Oxford in 2010 that when he was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, he advocated for the most generous and open borders immigration system possible because he believed his commitment was to, quote, global welfare. It's the same mentality that someone, Louise Perry, knows, and she's told the story before, but also a utilitarian on a live stream recently said, the same mentality that says, well, it's actually a good thing to have the Pakistani grooming gangs in Britain rather than in Pakistan, because they'd still be committing the same sexual abuse against their own girls, but it's better to commit it against British girls because we have a justice system that can actually take it and diminish the number of attacks.
I'd expect that much the same crimes would be done in Pakistan, and I'm far happier that they are doing them in Britain, where there is a modern police force that would be more likely to arrest them. And I think the total amount of crime in the world would have gone down by allowing grooming gangs to immigrate to Britain.
Sorry, okay, can you repeat that? So you're saying it's better that grooming gangs go to Britain because the British police force is a modern police force, and therefore there's overall in sort of like net utilitarian terms, there's less grooming gangs in the world or something. Is that your argument?
Yeah. Yes. Why?
Really?
What's wrong with it? I am entirely unapologetically somebody who cares about total utility and not one country over another.
Not only is this not true because the justice system worked to cover it up because they were afraid of being called racist and to protect the Pakistani heritage community, and because Pakistanis themselves only commit these crimes because of in-group preference and out-group hatred along familial, clannish, ethnic, and religious lines. But it's also abhorrent because every single act of violence committed against a British national is a consequence of state policy and is committed by someone who never needs to be in the country in the first place. Every single penny of taxpayer cash spent on illegal or legal migrants alike is a theft from the hard work of the native British population spent on someone who never needs to be in this country in the first place. And it's premised on a universalist reading of human nature as tabula rasa, blank slate, which means that if you just take a man from here and bring him to here, give him enough money, give him a sufficient education, inculcate and enrich him in British values, that he will become indistinguishable from you and me. It is the premise of a propositional nation like America. Now, Much to be debated about that. I'm with Samuel Huntington on this, that America is not a nation of immigrants, per the John F. Kennedy and Anti-Defamation League phrase and book from the 50s, but is rather a nation of settlers. So it comes from a distinct people, that is Anglo-Protestants, WASPs, from fleeing the religious wars of Europe, and who rocked up at Plymouth Rock on the Mayflower, and as Governor John Winthrop said in his Massachusetts Bay sermon, wanted to craft America as a shining city on a hill, a new Jerusalem, a Christian kingdom fit for the Anglos, to whom the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights premises were self-evident because they had practiced a distinct culture. It was familiar to them, therefore they thought it was universal and befitting all. This is a very American premise, a very propositional nation premise, because it presumes that you just need to take someone from somewhere and have them live by the rules that would be fit to make a society of rational devils, as Kant once said, and they will instantly become British. And British is itself just a economic, legal, and cultural identity, not an identity conferred through ancestry, lineage, tradition, custom. And we know this is how Reform think about things, because Zia Yusuf himself, when the burqa debate was unfolding, when he stormed off as chairman and came back as head of UK Doge after Sarah Pochen said she wanted to ban the burqa, said that he would be uncomfortable with the burqa ban, but if he were asked to vote for it when he eventually becomes an MP and is given a safe seat, which he's been promised, by the way, he would vote for it. But he said he's uncomfortable with proposing a burqa ban because he's uncomfortable banning things that would not be banned under America's First Amendment. Now, there are lots of things to like about the First Amendment. The Brandenburg Principle, as laid out by a Supreme Court case, I believe it was, is something that the UK should emulate to ensure the likes of Lucy Connolly, Peter Lynch, Judy Sweeney, Wayne O'Rourke, and the thousands of other people every year who are arrested and charged and imprisoned for social media posts and public order offences, to ensure that they are never persecuted for their speech again, alongside all the Christians arrested and charged with praying silently in their own head outside abortion clinics to honour the murdered children there. It would be great to adopt that, but betraying his mindset there, Zia Yusuf thinks of, and therefore Reform UK at large think of, the UK as America. It's an economic zone. It's a place where anyone from anywhere can rock up, and as long as they pay their fees and have done their paperwork and recite the Scouts' pledge of British values, just like in America, if you pass a civics test, you become an American citizen, or you become British, a British citizen. You become as indistinguishably English as someone who can trace their lineage back to the Venerable Bede. This is not what Reform UK supporters want. This is not what the electorate more broadly want in their revealed preferences. What they acknowledge is the British are a distinct people. Yes, they can accommodate some neighbours from around the world, but that's on a relational basis. If they live next to them, if they do them some sort of service as a doctor or a nurse or an engineer or something, and they often marry someone who is themselves ethnically of this place, and they bring their children up to be friends with their children and to become custodians of the culture. The English don't object to that. This is why they have the highest registered levels of tolerance in multiple polls of having neighbours of a different ethnicity, for example, of allowing their children to marry someone of a different ethnicity, and they have much lower levels of ethnic in-group preference than imported tribal minorities. Same for white Americans in America versus Hispanics, Asians, and Black Americans as well. This is not the issue. The issue is that people want a country that feels familiar to them. They want a country that is filled with neighbours and friends and faces they recognise and are therefore predictable, and so they don't have to feel on edge all the time. They don't have to suspect whether or not these people who showed up yesterday they can never hope to get to know have ill intent for them. They want a high trust and homogenous culture again. And just turning the UK into basically Dubai by allowing the international business class to buy their way into the country does not generate that. But Reform can only talk in purely economic terms because they cannot identify a distinct British people to which they think their party should have loyalty, even though they are topping the polls, slipping slightly in polling at the moment because of I think recent missteps, but nevertheless, topping the polls because they stand in for that populist, patriotic, immigration skeptic party who puts the British people first. And to put them first, you have to define a distinct British people, not just, as Tim Stanley quipped in his Telegraph piece recently on Brits becoming a minority in their own country, people who don't murder and pay their taxes. Reform think that's their constituency. It's not, and it is insufficient to govern for, because being British, as in having that lineage, abiding by that culture, buying into the faith that undergirds common law, Blackstone's formulation, all of our customs and traditions, being all of those things are the prerequisites, the enabling conditions for all of the things that reform wants, which is a deregulated market, a high trust culture, economic prosperity, social peace and cohesion, low crime. All of these things are enabled by cultural, religious, and, at least at a large volume, ethnic homogeneity. And none of these are moral condemnations of people who would like to come to this country or just exist in other countries. I'm not morally condemning the Japanese, and I'm not trying to culturally terraform Japan, even as a Christian, because I go to Japan, and will be later this year again, because I love Japanese culture, and I like being in Japan, and I like Japanese people. So in the same way, we should identify the distinct culture, the distinct traditions, the distinct religion, and the distinct people of Britain, and someone should represent them. There is basically a massive open flank in politics to do this. Now, I know some politicians are interested in doing this and eager to do so, and actually, other than Rupert Lowe, Robert Jenrick has been the rhetorically strongest on this. He wrote a Mail piece a little while ago saying that English identity is being erased, and yes, British identity is a legal fiction that has been invented to encompass originally the four identities of the British Isles, so that's English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, but now some of the people that we have historic ties to in the Commonwealth as a legacy of the empire. I think you're going to see the Commonwealth wither and die away, by the way, because demographic realities have really soured Gen Z and successive generations as they come up on the Commonwealth nations. Like, we have no great affinities for India because Indian culture is not good and very distant from ours, and the love of the Commonwealth is a sort of boomer hangover that will go the way of the dodo. Point being, Robert Jenrick has said, yeah, it's all well and good to have this fiction, but I'm an Englishman, my English identity is still very strong to me. It's a natural love which I should not have to rationally justify or get rid of to accommodate new outsiders who have nothing but contempt for us. But even Jenrick, at this event, and he gave a good speech, don't get me wrong, and called himself an Anglo-futurist, which means that he recognises the Anglos as a distinct people capable of greatness compared to other nations. But even he turned around at the after party and tapped Robert Toombs on the shoulder and shook his hand, and then, like some sort of portent from the gods, turned to the group that was standing outside the bar when this interaction happened and said, "This man taught me everything I know," which means that our political class, almost collectively, still have no idea what time it is. And they better realize it soon. Because not only is there a great political opportunity just laying on the table, waiting for them to take, which it looks like Reform UK is not keen on doing. I mean, for example, they didn't understand the bad optics of allowing their Muslim former chairman to announce brand new buy your way into Britain visas for wealthy foreigners, while still not having delivered their mass deportation policy as announced and promised from right before the election. Not only did Reform UK not understand that massive optics blunder, which means that they're just habitually not representing the British people who are under siege, demographically, culturally, economically, you name it. But also, again, the hour is far too late for this. We are on the precipice of preventable civil conflict along ethnic lines. I don't want that to happen. One of my most salient early political moments was the London riots when they came near my road as a kid. It was awful. And to know now that this would be far more violent, far more widespread, and result in a hell of a lot of deaths, according to David Betts' calculations, is awful. It's preventable if a political solution arises and if someone has sufficient courage to speak in these terms. And as of yet, nobody does. As of yet, we're only getting the likes of Robert Toome say, the Michaela School is our future. I don't want to live in South Africa or Liberia or Lebanon, but I equally don't want to live in the Longhouse or the headmistress-dominated panopticon that is being offered as a solution to the destruction of our settled host majority culture by unwanted mass immigration and multiculturalism. And look, if these are the sacrifices we're going to have to make multiculturalism work, as Birbal Singh says, then I'm sorry. It's multiculturalism and immigration, not English identity, that has to give way.